Today, a judge put on a gag order. I'll be the only politician in history that runs with a gag order where I'm not allowed to criticize people. Can you imagine this? Do you believe this? I'm not allowed to criticize people. So we'll see. We'll appeal it, and we'll see. But it's so unconstitutional. The good thing is we have so much support. It's incredible. And it just makes it even more so. Look, I'm the only guy that ever got indicted. I got indicted more than Alphonse Capone. Did anyone ever hear of Al Capone? If you looked at him the wrong way, he was seriously tough, right? Scarface. You know, they call him Scarface. Had a little scar in there. I'm sure it was a minor accident, but he was Scarface. But Al Capone, if you looked at him in the wrong way, if he didn't like you, you looked at him a little bit askance, he blew your brains out. He was only indicted one time. I've been indicted 4 times. And in addition, I have these civil trials that are all coming out of the Justice Department. They've weaponized the Justice Department and the FBI. A judge gave a gag order today. Did you hear that on speech? Which I believe is totally unconstitutional, what she did. A judge gave a gag order. A judge doesn't like me too much. Her whole life is not liking me. But she gave a gag order. You know what a gag order is? You can't speak badly about your opponent. But this is weaponry all being done because Joe Biden is losing the election and losing very, very badly to all of us.
Leave it to Donald Trump to be on the receiving end of a gag order and then during his first public appearance to attack the judge who issued it. If Judge Chutkan needed any validation for her actions, it didn't take long for her to get it. Now, in terms of the gag order itself, Judge Chutkan imposed a narrowly tailored gag order that'll include restrictions on statements about Special Counsel Jack Smith, about court staff, and about possible witnesses. Judge Chutkan said, without this restriction, there's a risk witnesses can be intimidated, which would prevent other witnesses from coming and testifying and cooperating, which, of course, is the entire point. Donald Trump may be an anti-democratic brute who may or may not be able to pass a 7th grade spelling test, but he knows how to intimidate, extort, and manipulate people, which is why this gag order was desperately needed. Now, the most important question here, what happens if and when Trump violates it? Here's Glenn Kirshner during a recent episode of The Legal Breakdown explaining exactly that point.
So they discussed today, I was in the courtroom today, they discussed what sanctions might be imposed, what might be available. And the following sanctions were mentioned: financial penalties, home detention, criminal contempt, and revocation of pretrial release. In other words, sitting Donald Trump in a jail cell pending trial. All of those are on the table. I think they are all well within the realm of possibilities. I do think when Donald Trump first violates the pretrial release conditions, the gag order, you know, it will be a lower level punishment, maybe a financial penalty, which of course he'll just grift off his base. He's already fundraising off the gag order, but I think it will pretty quickly escalate up to and including pretrial detention. In fact, John Lauro, Donald Trump's criminal defense attorney, actually said at one point, okay, so Judge, what are you going to do? Put Donald Trump in a jail cell? And Judge Chutkan just kind of sat back and let that hang in the air. Here's the other important thing when we're discussing what might happen when Donald Trump violates this order. At the very end of the hearing, the judge said, you know, in the event there's a violation, the prosecutors can certainly file a motion with the court for what's called a show cause order. That is something that requires a defendant to come into court and show cause why he didn't violate a condition set by the court and why he shouldn't be sanctioned for that violation. She said, you know, the prosecutors can file that motion, plus I will be sua sponte policing this issue. Now, she used the term sua sponte, fancy lawyer's term for I am going to initiate it on my own if I see a reason to. I'm paraphrasing what she said, but when she said sua sponte, she was sending a message that I may not even wait for the prosecutors to file a motion or to put me on notice that there's a possible violation of my gag order. I'm going to be looking at it sua sponte, and I would say, knowing Judge Chutkan from having tried murder cases against her back in the day, Donald Trump better not test her resolve.
And of course, to see more of me and Glenn, make sure to subscribe to this channel for breaking news coverage of all things legal with our show The Legal Breakdown, available only on this YouTube channel. Now, ahead of the inevitable pearl clutching by Trump's allies, it's important to note that this gag order was absolutely expected, given that he had already violated the terms of his pretrial release. When Trump was being arraigned for this very case in Washington, D.C., here's what the magistrate judge said to him, quote, "Your most important condition of release, sir, is that you not commit a state, federal, or local crime while on release. If you were to do so, again, a warrant may be issued for your arrest, your conditions of release may be revoked, and you may be held pending trial in this case." And I hope you listen closely to the words state crime, because that's what he did. Donald Trump, within days of getting that warning, took to Truth Social and wrote, "I am reading reports that failed former Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan, will be testifying before the Fulton County grand jury. He shouldn't. I barely know him, but he was, right from the beginning of this witch hunt, a nasty disaster for those looking into the election fraud that took place in Georgia." So let's be clear, Trump states in his own post that he knows Jeff Duncan will be testifying, thereby making it clear that he is aware he is a witness, and then he goes on to state that he shouldn't testify, meaning that Trump is publicly pressuring a known witness not to testify against him. And that's not only a crime in the state of Georgia, but a violation of the very condition of his release that he expressly agreed to in the D.C. courtroom. He then did it again with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, putting out a post on Truth Social that said, quote, "Mark Milley, who led perhaps the most embarrassing moment in American history with his grossly incompetent implementation of the withdrawal from Afghanistan, costing many lives, leaving behind hundreds of American citizens, and handing over billions of dollars of the finest military equipment ever made, will be leaving the military next week. This will be a time for all citizens of the USA to celebrate. This guy turned out to be a woke train wreck who, if the fake news reporting is correct, was actually dealing with China to give them a heads up on the thinking of the President of the United States. This is an act so egregious that, in times gone by, the punishment would have been death. A war between China and the United States could have been the result of this treasonous act. To be continued." And, not for nothing, but the punishment for treason is still death, meaning if he's accusing Milley of treason, he's effectively saying that he should be executed, meaning this is yet another instance of Trump finding someone who has direct, first-hand knowledge of the events that took place leading up to and on January 6th, and using his mob boss tactics to dissuade them from testifying against him. So if the Trump team suggests that there's no basis for a gag order against him, you might want to point them to their client's own words compared with the conditions of his release that those words directly violate. Now, of course, you'll notice from Trump's remarks from the video at the top that he claims he isn't allowed to talk about Joe Biden, suggesting that the judge is preventing him from speaking about his political opponent during an election, which certainly could be a violation of his free speech rights. The problem is that Judge Chutkan's gag order did no such thing. Again, the only prohibitions are on Trump's speech regarding court staff, the prosecutor, and witnesses. Trump can say whatever he wants about Joe Biden. And the fact that he had to come out and lie about what that gag order actually says shows that it was actually well-founded. Because if he had any legitimate grievance with it, he'd have taken the opportunity to air it. But because it was all completely warranted, instead his only move was to lie and pretend that it prevented him from talking about Biden, which it absolutely does not do. He also claimed that it was unconstitutional, suggesting that the gag order is a violation of his First Amendment rights. But again, that is dead wrong. Here again is Glenn Kirshner explaining why the First Amendment can be curbed in deference to the administration of justice and to protecting witnesses.
So the First Amendment is not absolute, particularly as it applies to somebody who is on release pending trial, because that person is subjected to the conditions set for them by the court to protect the orderly administration of justice, to protect the jury pool from being tainted, to protect the witnesses who are expected to testify at trial. And the judge said this over and over again in today's hearing. The First Amendment is not absolute, particularly for somebody on pretrial release. So the First Amendment claim sounds good, but all sorts of constitutional rights actually can and do yield when you are a charged defendant in a federal felony case on release pending trial. For example, a judge can impose a curfew. A judge can tell you you can't go out of your house after 8 p.m. Well, if you were not in a pretrial status, a judge or a government official could never impose that kind of restraint on your movement. The same holds true with the First Amendment. It yields to the extent that the judge has a responsibility to ensure a free trial untainted by statements made by a defendant, and the Supreme Court has made that clear over and over again.
Remember too, this is now the second gag order that Trump's been hit with. Just 2 weeks ago, Judge Engoron imposed one in the New York civil suit. That partial gag order came as the result of Trump posting about Judge Engoron's clerk in a now deleted Truth Social post, showing a photo of the clerk posing with Chuck Schumer, insinuating a personal relationship between the two, and calling out the clerk by name down to the middle initial. And if you're wondering whether it was necessary to even include her middle initial, that might help explain the goal here, which, by the way, is always the goal: to endanger her family, intimidate her and other clerks and other witnesses and other judges and other prosecutors into not prosecuting Donald Trump, because it could mean that somebody gets hurt in the process. Trump may be, again, diabolical and morally bankrupt, but he's not stupid. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he knows exactly how his supporters, who have already proven themselves dangerous, will take the information that he's giving them. Which is why a gag order was desperately needed, and the fact that one was imposed is yet another sign, despite how long it's taken to get here, that Trump is not above the law. And while the wheels of justice certainly move slowly, we're at least seeing them move. And that's not great news for a guy currently contending with 91 charges in 4 different jurisdictions. One would think that focusing on bolstering his defenses would be more important than attacking witnesses, but then you know what they say: play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to the channel and do your part to help grow the progressive media ecosystem. I don't do sponsorships or paid ads, I won't ask for money, but just subscribing to this channel goes a really long way, and it helps get the message out to more people. The subscribe button is right here on the screen. You can also subscribe to my Spanish language channel, which I made to reach those crucial Spanish-speaking voters. That link is on the screen too. And finally, if you want to listen to my audio podcast, you can follow that link as well. Thanks so much for watching.